Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I got a delay here.
No.
So I think the reason why 3PLs want to specialize is because the market now is so big and mature that you want to be good at one particular area and not mediocre in a bunch of different lanes. So we specialize in generic e-commerce goods that are apparel based, electronics, easy to manage, where there's a lot of customs complexities at the beginning, where I speak to a brand, we do an audit on their HS code list. So we're much more specialized than an average 3PL from our perspective because we are customs brokers. So I can look at a company's business, see is there an opportunity here for them because maybe not just imported from China, they're importing from other countries. Could they be using de minimis as an option? And many brands before Trump came along had never heard of that. So that was one area that we could specialize in right away, explain the nuances of importing to Canada to avoid the tariffs and go on that route. Because it was a scary proposition. It sounds like you're doing something illegal. So speaking to a licensed customs broker or a founder of my company who knows customs inside and out, gave them the feeling of they were in a right place. They weren't doing anything that was wrong, and it helped the conversation continue forward. We partner with a company in the U.S. who's a large 3PL. They only focus on heavyweight items. We've been in that game. We don't like that game. It's a difficult area to service. So I think as the industry has gotten more mature, companies just found their role and what's going to make best sense for them. And there's lots of companies who call us up, and after 5 minutes, I say, you've got great business opportunity. It's just not great for us. So my advice to anybody who's looking at a 3PL is to honestly, if you can, go and visit them, because until you go and see their facility, you meet the people, they're just a picture on the screen and you're not going to know what you're dealing with. And I'm surprised after COVID, there's so many companies who have signed up with us and I've never met them before. I've had 100 Zoom calls with them, but they've never come to our facility. And to me, that's a little strange,
Totally makes sense. Jan, I mean, anything on your end to add about what you see about differentiations with different 3PLs in the ecosystem and thinking about picking a 3PL that's for your right needs? And maybe the second question I'll tag on to that is, what do you do if you have a brand that nowadays almost every brand is selling omni-channel? They're selling DTC, they're selling through Walmart, Target, Costco, maybe they're even selling on the .com, so the dropship marketplace versions of those retailers. Tell us a bit about how you kind of advise the modern omni-channel brand today.
Yeah, I will say that a lot of 3PLs have had to learn those pieces if they haven't done it before, particularly retail and wholesale. Pick and pack for e-commerce is not very complicated. The real question is, how well do they do it, right? Because most 3PLs will say that, yep, we do wholesale. We have clients that do wholesale. But I think it's very different if like they're doing a target order and they're doing one target order every 4 months, versus there are some 3PLs they're like, yeah, we do wholesale, and they're doing 3 or 4 target orders per week for multiple brands. So that, I think, is that sort of degree. And when you do your due diligence, ask those questions. Like, when you say you've done it before, do you mean like you're someone on the ground's holding the routing guide and just reading it for the first time? Or they're like, yeah, I mean, like, we've done this for the last like 3 or 4 years, and it's straightforward for us.
And
so
what is the difference that you see there, Jan? Is it really just like compliance with the routing guides? Is it the speed at which they are able to fulfill and turn around orders? Like what makes that difference between fulfilling to target once a quarter, once a month, once a week, once a day?
Yeah, I think you hit it, nail on the head, right? Which is, it is the speed, right? Of course, the more time to do it, I mean, the less likely they are to make mistakes. I think that already is key, because you never want to, run into that issue with Target, because it sort of reflects back on you, the brand, not the 3PL. You can't really blame the 3PL. But it is speed. I have heard at certain 3PLs where they, you drop an order and they might have a certain SLA, but sometimes they blow past it, and it could take 3 or 5 days depending on the size of the order And if sometimes when you, as a brand, you have a tight turnaround, most of the time you do, right? Particularly for if you're ordering or manufacturing specifically for Target, right? You're not just pulling from your e-com, pool of inventory, then oftentimes you have such a tight, it's coming in from China, you have 3-4 days because you're already a little bit late, right, to turn that around. So I think that's where it's key. And I think most of all, they might catch things that the brand, a new brand might not know that you got to do for Target, and they might actually save you from issues down the line.
Got it.
When I speak to a lot of small and medium-sized companies, one of the struggles that they have when they're looking for a new 3PL is that they've grown out of the current 3PL they're with. And that 3PL might be a large multinational, a large 3PL, but when they started, they were doing 200 orders a month. And now they're at 5,000. And they feel like they're not getting the level of service that they need. They have to send an email and wait 24 hours to get a reply. There's no phone number for them to speak to anybody outside of their account manager, and they can't get a hold of their account manager. So they were willing to deal with that stuff when they had 200 orders a month because it's just the way it was. But now when they're at 5,000, they can't deal with that. They've got 10 issues a day that have to be directed to somebody at the 3PL. And they're not at the scale for those large 3PLs of the 20 and 50,000 to really get the hands-on service that they're looking for. And that's where a lot of the smaller and medium-sized players they struggle with the 3PL they're with.
Totally. And it's funny, one of the things that we often kind of tell brands is with 3PLs, it's kind of like working with any other service provider, right? Like an accounting firm, a legal firm, a law firm, etc. You can go to the big, blue chip firm that has offices in SF, in New York, and London, Hong Kong, Tokyo. But unless you are one of their top 10 marquee clients that's spending hundreds of millions of dollars with them every single year, you're probably not going to get a phone number to be able to pick up and call when something goes wrong. Conversely, if you go with too small of a firm, if you go with your neighbor, your next door neighbor who runs the local mom and pop law firm, you might not get the level of quality and service that you also need, especially if you're trying to scale. And so there very much is a feel kind of equation that we've often guided folks towards, of saying, hey, have you found the right 3PL for the right part of your journey? Just because a fulfillment center that also fulfills for Nike is willing to take you on, does that mean that it is actually the right decision for you to go to that fulfillment center? Because, if Nike needs a few more racks and you are a small fish in the pond, like, you might be the first brand out the door during your next renewal cycle.
Yeah, I've used that line quite a few times.
Yeah, it's spot on. Cool. So why don't we do a quick kind of subtle transition here, folks? I want to chat about a topic that comes up a lot in our webinars and has come up a lot over the last week or so. Let's chat a little bit about duty deferment and bonded warehousing, because that is a very hot topic. So Jesse, are you guys a bonded warehouse, or do you operate in a free trade zone and FTZ zone by any chance?
So no, we are neither a free trade zone warehouse or a bonded warehouse. Like, unfortunately, on the Canadian side, bonded warehouses went away. They were much more common 20, 30 years ago. Every small town in Canada had a bonded warehouse, and it was just the way it went. And then because of NAFTA, there was not the need anymore to produce goods to put into a bonded warehouse to then maybe do some value-added manufacturing and then ship into the United States. So unfortunately, the bonded warehousing in Canada is shrunk. I've gotten a lot of calls from a lot of US-based people asking, hey, do you have a bonded warehouse in the States? Because I know that space is full at this time.
Totally.
So unfortunately, it's not an easy area for Canadian 3PLs to provide any bonded services.
Got it. And maybe just for the audience who doesn't know, the audience members who don't know, or who haven't, aren't familiar, either Jan or Jesse want to chat a little bit about what is a bonded warehouse, what is the value or benefit of bonded warehouse, and one of the kind of nuance points is, what is the difference between a bonded warehouse and a free trade zone based warehouse? Because there is some nuance about when the calculation of the duties are calculated based on which one of the two they are. Jan, I don't know if you want to take this, or Jesse, if you want to dive in.
I can do a quick high level. So I talked to a lot of brands about this, and the you have a few options, right? So essentially, in terms of duty deferment, you have, if your FTZs, bonded warehouses in the US, and then you have basically essentially the other option is to bring the goods as close as possible, but not into the US, which is either Canada or Mexico, which we're talking about here. So the difference, typically speaking, is that with an FTZ and a bonded warehouse, right, you're basically moving the goods into the US without actually clearing customs. So you're holding it in bond. That's like what it means. And so the difference between those two is that the similarity is that you should pay duties and tariffs once you pull it out at the point of withdrawal from the FTZ or the bonded warehouse. And the key difference is for the FTZs, the duties and tariffs are associated with those goods on the point of entry. And with the bonded warehouse, it's the reverse. You pay what the rate is at on the day you withdraw from that warehouse. And of course, what that means is today, in an environment of high tariffs, FTZs are not a good option because you don't want to lock in at 145. You're bringing it in at 0 and waiting to see what it is, right? And when it comes down to hopefully 30 or 40, and you have, you need the inventory, you pull it out and you pay 30 or 40%. So that essentially is what those two are. And then when you look at Canada and Mexico, right, that's essentially a bonded warehouse because it's just sitting outside of the US, and it acts pretty much like a bonded warehouse in the sense that, you don't pay duties and tariffs on the way in. You do pay it on the way out, and you pay on the day of withdrawal.
Got it. No, totally makes sense. You're effectively rolling the dice a little bit, right? What are the chances, though, that duties go up even more during the time period that you're in the bonded warehouse, because then you're stuck on the other side of the gamble, right?
Yes.
Got it. Makes such a sense. Jesse, anything else to add in there about brands that are looking at specifically tapping into a bonded warehouse or into a warehouse that's in a free trade zone? How do you kind of advise brands or merchants about the necessity behind this, especially during kind of volatile trade times like we're going through right now?
Yeah, so when US brands call me and they're asking about bonded warehouse space in the US, right now I'm telling them, good luck finding that. And if you can, you might as well take that space, because if you're not going to fill it, you could maybe sublease that or something and make a fortune, because it's hard to find bonded warehouse space right now in the US and in Canada. Unfortunately, the process in Canada to get set up for a bonded warehouse, from what I know, I think it takes about a year to go through all the requirements with Canada Customs, because when you have a bonded warehouse, Customs is on your site physically, generally, if not every day, then multiple times a week, doing inspections and looking at different things. So from a standpoint of having Customs at your warehouse facility every single day, potentially, a lot of warehouse operators don't want to have that. So I'm wondering how many companies have applied for bonded warehousing that, if this tariff situation goes away, are quickly going to drop that application.
Totally. And it's funny, as a quick aside, someone said this joke who was on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, which is with Mr. Elon Musk and the government right now, Doge seems to be slashing every part of the government except for U.S. Customs and Borders, which is the only part of the government that's going to need to add some additional headcount in real time to be able to keep up with these additional oversights that they'll have to start doing. So just a quick funny aside. And maybe just wrapping up this topic here, Jan, and zooming out to kind of the further step at a fundamental level when advising a brand on their holistic operations, right? So not just the movement of their goods, but also their finances and the operating financial piece. Why is duty deferment and using a bonded warehouse actually beneficial? Does it ultimately just come down to a cash conversion cycle thing? Like, what is the framework to think about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're right. I think the primary advantage right now, it is cash. I think it's actually two parts, right? You have cash flow, right, which is having money tied in. But besides that, actually, it's also about right now. I mean, I've talked to certain brands, right, with the high value goods. They might be selling, like, for example, like a coffee machine, right, for $1,000. That's an additional, $200-300 in duties and tariffs. And it's not just about the cash flow, because once you bring it in, the duties and tariff money never comes back, right? That hits your P&L as a new line item called duties and tariffs, and your profitability on that unit, it's gone. So essentially, I think as you think about more broadly about why brands are thinking about this, why they need to sort of get it right, is that, again, holidays are coming. You don't want to get into a situation where you run out of stock, right? Where you keep it in China, right? Keep your goods in China, and holidays rolling around, and now you're like, you know what? It's come down now. Start shipping, right? And you might get here in December, on December 15th or something like that. You've lost all your Cyber Monday sales, but you also can't bring it in early, right? Because you bring it in, you pay the duties right now. Essentially, this is the other joke, is like, if you bring it 145, for a lot of brands, it's cheaper to just like burn it and get rid of the stuff than actually selling it, right? Because you're locking in the negative profitability. So I think that's kind of why it's so important to sort of take a look at these strategies to keep inventory close, but not pay for the tariffs unless you really have to, or that's basically the best situation that you have, and then move forward from there.
Totally. And for any brands who are listening or who will listen, if there was a time to get really, really tight on pulling together your operations chops along with your financial muscle, it is now. Cash flow is going to become hyper pertinent as brands are getting squeezed on both sides, right? Both on supply constraints and supply chain issues, but also with demand channels continuously becoming more and more expensive, and now also potentially brands looking to pass along the cost of these tariffs to their end consumers. We're uncertain about what consumer demand will look like, but super, super helpful. Yeah, and Jesse, in the last couple of minutes we have left, any final words for folks about how to operate during these time periods of uncertainty, and what's the best way to think about their supply chain construction and supply chain management?
I'll just quickly mention, getting set up in Canada is relatively easy for US companies. So you need what's called an NRI, non-resident importer business number. And the process of getting that set up, along with a Canadian customs bond and all the other stuff that you would need, it can happen as easily as in 3 to 4 weeks. So by the time your inventory potentially arrives in the country, your business is already set up. A customs broker like Trade Affairs International can help you through the process of getting that completed. And by the time the product arrives, integration can be completed with Shopify, and orders kind of flow out the door almost as soon as the product lands, or inventory can start to be transferred into the US as you need. So getting set up in Canada is just not that difficult. And I kind of find it funny that so many brands have not focused on Canada for sales, and maybe don't want to provide 100% of a product catalog to the Canadian market, but those top 20 SKUs that probably represent 60 to 80% of your overall volume, at least having those available on Amazon or on your website directly to ship to Canadians, it's going to be area of growth for your company.
Cool. Jan, anything else for you to add on your end?
Yeah, this has probably been covered before, so I won't go too deep into it. It's things are going to change, right? I mean, tariffs go up, tariffs come down. I think generally what we're kind of seeing is that we anticipate that tariffs are going to be higher than they are before. But typically we don't recommend that brands do something just because of a small change, right? We always think longer term, and sort of don't make sort of knee-jerk reactions. And part of the reason why in my conversations with brands I've recommended this as one route is because it is a double benefit. It has a short-term benefit of duties deferral, but longer term, I think, Canada, and I mean, a lot of brands too have been looking at selling to Australia. I've been having conversations with Australia, about UK. I think Canada is much easier than those two markets. So I think it's a great place to start, and always happy to chat with brands if they want a sounding board.
Super, super helpful. Well, yeah, and Jesse, thank you so much for coming on. We always wrap this up with, if folks who are listening or who hear the recaps want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do so for you, Jan?
Yeah, for us, just reach out, operatingcrew.com. My email is yan@operatingcrew. So always happy to chat.
Awesome. And Jesse, how about you for folks that want to explore SFI or Canadian fulfillment options?
Yeah, they can track us down on our website at sfi.ca and just leave a comment.
Cool. Wonderful. Well, yeah. And Jesse, thank you guys so much for coming on and for taking the time. Really excited that we got to do this.
Yeah, it was great.
It was great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks all.